Lord of the Rings is so beautiful. Can I make my own world?
In the past, I had no idea how to make my own world, but now, after doing just one illustration. Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to learn how I made the image in the thumbnail, and by the end of the video we would have gone through a world building process. Let's get started. Planning. So in order to make a single image, we first have to establish what are we even doing? And when this happens to me, whenever I feel lost, it's time to get more reference and more inspiration. In this section, I make a reference board, a map, a perspective view of that map, and another more specific reference board. I make these 4 images to stay more grounded throughout the project. So is everyone ready? Cause let's get started in collecting reference. So I go to Pinterest and I find images that inspire me. Ming, Qing architecture, but kind of poor. A village close to the water. I feel like I want to make a fishing village. And I just repeat this process for 4 more zones. In order to think about one city, context for how it relates to other cities for me is super valuable. Now that we're feeling super inspired, let's somehow express that inspiration. At this point, some people would write out a story or think about a character, however you best express yourself. But for me, I love maps. Using these satellite images plus being inspired, I generate my own map. This is my map. The top is mountain and forest. The colored blocks are the living zones. My 5 zones kind of expanded to 8. Don't worry about that. Below all these zones is the ocean. So it's kind of a lot to digest, but the main point is that the Fisherfolk zone is sandwiched between the Adventurers Guild and the Luddites, and they exist at the bottom of the cliff. So admittedly, these vertical relationships are kind of hard to see in satellite view. So that's why I made this new image where the Fisherfolk location is easier to understand in this vertical realm. And here we go, this is the new image in purple. We can see the fisherfolk at the bottom of the landscape. And the fisherfolk are not just at the bottom of the landscape, socioeconomically they're at the bottom of the surrounding villages. And that's why I had multiple zones. Because I have these different areas, I can think of how the fisherfolk zone relates in comparison to these different areas, which I think makes the whole world more believable. Okay, but 5 zones is a little much, so I simplified it to just working on one, the fisherfolk zone. So getting more specific with reference, what houses do they live in? How does it connect to the water? What mood am I going for? So for example, there are places in the world where ships are dismantled. It's called shipbreaking. It's super grueling work, kind of sad, but it exists. And I feel like that kind of vibe is what the fisherfolk in my mind live in. And so that's it with the planning. With this, we have a good foundation in which we can design. What are we designing? We are designing the buildings and the environment. Hey, I did 8 different designs, and I just want to let you know that in this section, we're going to go through all of them. And let's start with number 1. This is the Adventurers Guild. I just wanted to have fun and get started. I was thinking about those shipbreakers, but for monsters. And so the monsters are disassembled on the left. There's there's a bounty signs on the right, and the building is made from parts of an old boat. I have these callouts around, which I think is good reference to see what the materiality of each objects are. But moving on, I just wanted something more primitive, kind of like a more earthy kind of vibe. I wanted to design something more anti-tech, where social class is important. And it led me to this design, very stone and mortar buildings with faces. The taller the building, the higher the social prestige. And the higher the land is, the better you are. This whole zone, I call them the Neo-Luddites, they're higher than the fisherfolk, and so they think they're way better than the fisherfolk. Here we have an open restaurant/market made from the inside of boats. There are 4 designs here. In this design, version D, we can see the twin boats creating the entrance, followed by an interior of seating and small stores. The walls of this eating zone are made from the hollows of 3 ships. These designs are based on small food courts in Southeast Asia. I have fond memories of these, as I always eat here when I visit my family in Malaysia. Enough reminiscing though, next design. So the fisher folk get exploited, but how do they get exploited? And maybe I should just do one example. So in this example, the bottom fishermen quickly sell to the company in order to offload their cargo. However, they don't really make much. Meanwhile, the company sells fish that they just bought from these fishermen at the bottom at a much higher price at the top and like feed it into their restaurant at the very, very top. These buildings are for the Inventor Sisters that unlock as a secret blacksmith for the character. They have water mills to power their tools. On the left, we have another adventurous guild, but in a different layer. And on the right, the entrance to a residential ward. So now we're at the residential ward. Here are some buildings in the residential ward. The fisher folk live on the top and the bottom is a marketplace. And so out of all these designs, which one do you think I chose to go forward with? So I picked something that is easy, that I know I can complete, and that is the residential district buildings in the fisher folk zone. I chose this because they're literally rectangles and I'm not the strongest 3D artist. Moving on, that's where my next steps are. The designs are done, so now it's time to do 3D. Fake 3D. I called this section Fake 3D because I know the final product isn't going to be in 3D. I'm probably going to use 3D to get 80% of the way there, and the last 20% I'm going to do in 2D. And this image should be super easy to convert to 3D. So inside Blender, I just import the image as planes. Then I use Quick Shape to cut things out. After that, I can extrude those shapes as rectangles. Then copy and paste some UV so it makes it a little bit more sense at the sides. And I just add in giant cylinders as a landscape and voila, we're done. Then I move my camera around and decide on a composition to proceed with. In this case, I chose the bottom left composition. I think all of these could have worked really, but I just went with the bottom left. And now the composition and design are done. So how do we make this as easy as possible for ourselves? Well, we make assets. These assets don't have to be 3D quality assets. Instead, in my head, I'm thinking 2D functional quality assets. Remember, the 3D is just a tool, not the final product. 80% in 3D, 20% figure it out in 2D. The images that are used for these assets, they're literally from everywhere and anywhere. These lanterns, they're from the Shutterstock examples, and I just extrude it out. This Chinese sign it's a cutout from Pinterest. And then I use textures.com and Kitbash 3D, which are actually pretty legit. In terms of the actual 3D process, it's pretty simple. I work big to small. I batch together the assets. The mountain/landscapes are from Quixel. I add a pathway for the eye to follow. All my people, they're from Mixamo. And then at the end, I add lighting. 3D is done. Finishing. We are at the finish line, but hold on, there's still work to be done. It's not smooth sailing the whole time. This is my image before a paint over, and this is my image after the paint over. Even when my paint over is worse and I want to quit, being able to finish images regardless of how you feel is important. And so let's just keep going to the finish. My finishing process is going from 3D to 2D. So here's my cycles render from 3D, and here is my mist pass. With the goal to finish in mind, I combined the mist pass on top of the cycles pass to get extra depth. I have Kevin Jig to thank for teaching me this tech, super helpful. When painting in 2D, layer separation will help a bunch, but how do we get these layers? So I get my layers by splitting via depth using camera clipping in Blender. I hate lassoing everything all the time. It's way too much work. Then I just copy the alpha onto the image, and as you can see, my piece gets all the layers nicely split up. And after I have all these layers, okay, hold up. At this stage, our image is pretty much done. We've done 80% in 3D, and we just need to carry the last 20%. However, on how to carry the last 20%, it's kind of beyond the scope of this video, so I'm gonna just share a few little hot tips that I think are important. Okay, resume. Between each layer, I add fog and I detail it. I use soft brushes for light, and then I use hard brushes for new objects. One tip is that for detailing, I use an Eevee render from 3D. I grab my Eevee render, I duplicate it, then I hide it with a mask, and then if I flip the alpha, I can just paint detail back in. And I do this for each one of those layers we cut out before. I add fog, add some soft brush for light, and then I add Eevee detail. And that's my complete detail pass. And at the end, I just post-process, LCT it, or levels, color, autotone. And we're done. But wait, there's more. Using those techniques, I was able to make not one, not two, not three, but 4 extra images. And although it seems like a long process, I think once you establish the world, it kind of starts to build itself. But have you ever done any world building? Please leave a comment below letting me know. And thanks for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day or night wherever you are in the world. Thanks guys, bye.